All right, so this is my Ecological Integration Symposium oral report. Presentation one, I got there late, so I didn't catch the name of the author or the title of the presentation. But I assume he was a graduate student. I'm not entirely sure on that though. But the objective of the research was to quantify behavioral states of translocated desert bighorn sheep following release, determining behavioral specific habitat selection, and predicting why we see differences in behavior and habitat selection. The research took place on a private property in Mexico, where these sheep were taken from one property and placed in another. The properties were owned by the same guy, I believe. Not too sure on that. The captured sheep received video callers, and the presentation had videos from the footage that they captured. I think that the callers also gave the locations of the sheep. I'm not entirely sure. I don't really remember, but I think that was part of it. The translocated sheep tended to settle in quickly, and this is what the presentation focused on. The hypothesis was the translocated sheep settle in with the residents, and that is why they settle so quickly. So this turned out to be true, and it explained the unusual behavior of the unsettled sheep. The unsettled sheep would not immediately go to higher elevations because they could see much more from the lower elevations, and this allowed them to locate the resident sheep and integrate into their populations. So yeah, so instead of just like running up to the mountain, the sheep would just like stay kind of like halfway up, maybe a little lower, so they could see the other sheep. And I thought that was weird, considering that they, live on a mountain and all. And I know I didn't really have any questions. I thought that was interesting that they wouldn't just run straight up the mountain, but they somebody asked a question about them like both the populations like mixing together, and he said that it kind of like varies. So like some of them will be welcoming, other times they like won't be. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Presentation two, the title was Rare and Convergent High Elevation Coexistence of Caenolestes and Cryptotis in the Northern Andes. Presentation author was Alexia Engel. I believe that could be wrong. And then the professional level presenter was graduate student. The objective of the research was to evaluate whether there is a niche overlap and indications of interspecific competition between Caenolestes and Cryptodis. This was done by analyzing and comparing the skulls of each species as well as their morphology. There were 13 measurements of each specimen's skull, and after the data was transformed to have a normal distribution, a PCA, principal component analysis, was done. The morphology between the two species in Colombia is very similar, but the morphology in Ecuador was less similar. So at the beginning of the presentation, she showed a picture of where these two species live, and they did have an overlap. So this in the pictures from the presentation of the skulls, they were also very similar. So that all kind of indicated that there was some sort of interspecies, whatever, interspecific competition. That's what it is. So that's kind of so the results were kind of what I expected after seeing that they lived in like the same place and that they looked very similar. So, but I thought it was overall pretty interesting. And so the last one, the title was Anthropogenic, however you say that, Climatic and Socioeconomic Factors Determining the Distribution of Bats in Nigeria, a Potential for Spread of Emerging Infectious Disease. The presentation author was unknown because it's my fault. I kind of wasn't paying attention, was tired, and he had a bit of an accent, so I couldn't really understand him. So, but that's mostly on me. Professional level, the presenter was a graduate student, and the objective of the research was to determine the factors responsible for the distribution of bat species across ecological zones in Nigeria, with a view to understanding emerging infectious disease spread. The researchers trapped bats via netting in order to record morphological characteristics. Characteristics being body size, forearm length, sex, age class, and reproductive class. Then 19 bioclimatic variables were collected from the World Clim database and weather data from NASA-powered daily meteorological data. Anthropogenic footage was obtained from the Human Footprint Index data set and population dynamics data relating to population density and socioeconomic factors of the locations of bats trapped were gathered from gridded population of the world version 4. All the variables and data were put into a linear model to determine their effect on bat species richness, diversity, and abundance. The research determined that there is a strong correlation between bat populations and various climatic, anthropogenic, and socioeconomic factors. All right, so I thought the presentation was pretty interesting. Bats, can't say that I would be too interested in that normally, but the presenter was pretty passionate about it, so it made it pretty easy to follow along. Overall, it was very very organized. It made it very easy to follow. The other presentations, I found it a little harder to follow overall. Like I would find myself a little confused, but this one is pretty straightforward, very organized, helped you to stay focused and not really confused. And I thought, I never really thought about bats before, so I thought that the climatic and anthropogenic and socioeconomics like playing a role on their populations was kind of interesting.